It's been a while since I did something for the gamers, but I promise this is more of old content versus new content trends, so don't click off yet if you're not a gamer. You might find this interesting, especially if you hate your 2D Disney cartoons turning into fake live action. I want to open this by saying this is a completely subjective take because this is entertainment, so everyone comes to these things differently. From my perspective, it's more of a feeling I've been having with the evolution of video game graphics than anything else, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it. We've been taking huge strides forward with the visual presentation of games through the life of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One generation coming all the way up to the present. We've had games like Gran Turismo Sport, Forza Horizon 4 in the UK and Horizon 5 in Mexico, Grand Theft Auto 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, Hideo Kojima's Death Stranding, Detroit Become Human, Ghost of Tsushima, you name it. We've even seen some amazing things with The Matrix Awakens and the next-gen graphics tech demo for Unreal Engine 5. All this is great, and I know a lot of people have been celebrating all these forward strides or even leaps in video game graphics. While progress is never a bad thing, I think this has come at the expense of the quality of modern games in other areas. If you've been in the same online spaces as me, you've probably heard people talking about how video games used to be fun, but they don't feel the same these days. And I think other than nostalgia being a very powerful drug, I think it's probably the pursuit of realism at the cost of creative innovation and stylization that's to blame. Let me explain. From playing Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, Smoky Mountain was always my favorite track. I played that game for about 2 years straight until I mastered every road, every corner and got as many licenses as I could. Colin McRae Rally from 1998 was also a game I played over and over like comfort food because I just loved being in every country in the game and all their tracks, just like Smoky Mountain and Gran Turismo, were fictional. Today, however, all the cars and tracks look even more real, and the good racing games are all trying to move further and further into the realm of simulation. It's almost like gaming has become a training process to get into real-world motorsports. And moving over to games like GTA 3, Vice City and San Andreas, which were all more fun and imaginative than GTA 4 and GTA 5 in my opinion, they all had very stylized takes on New York, Miami and California. Everyone who played that classic trilogy has their favorite places on the maps because they were all completely new and designed for fun and to service the story of each of the games. Once we got into GTA 4, which was a pretty solid game by all accounts, they mostly abandoned the goofy fun factor and went with a close to real life story that was dull, miserable, and had an unavoidable depressing conclusion. Even though in the process, they created a protagonist who a lot of people consider their favorite across all GTA games. Bear with me for a second. For people who read comics, you know the difference between Humberto Ramos and Mike Deodato Jr. Ramos' art is very stylized and wildly imaginative, while Mike Deodato sticks closer to reference and reality. Both are valid in the medium of comics, but one gives you more exciting and unexpected images and angles, and the other goes more for photorealism. And that's how I feel about the evolution of graphics, and this attempt to approximate the look of the real world as opposed to exciting fictional worlds. As realistic as Liberty City was in GTA 4, and I'm not dunking on it in any way, I have spent infinitely more time in GTA 3's Liberty City because it was an artist's interpretation of what New York could look like for this story, hence Ramos' art. GTA 4 feels less imaginative because when leaning on realistic aspects of actual world infrastructure that are based in practicality more than entertainment, you lose something in that translation. You end up driving through one boring grid after another. And just to reiterate, I think GTA 4 is a really good game, but in the real world, it may not make sense to put a corner here or a ramp there, but in the game you might think that it will add to the fun factor or lend itself to a mission that the player is to experience. I'll be honest, I never free roam in GTA 4 because the map is not very interesting, but it's very real world accurate, I can't deny that. In gaming, you build the world to fit your purpose without the constraints of what an engineer in the real world would do, so you end up with a more unique experience. That said, I'm just not thrilled about this trend of games starting to look like the real world outside my window, because the real world is more practical and mundane than interesting. If every big AAA game wants to approximate real life, you have to be really good at what you're doing to separate yourself from every other dull, grey, or foliage-dense game. 'Cause HD jungles, baby! And I'm not advocating for the complete cartoonization of games and abandoning any sense of reality, but there's a balance to be struck that the older single-player games were able to do. I can even talk about WWF SmackDown and SmackDown 2 on PS1, which I played for months on end as a kid, because the structure was so loose and unpredictable with very little scripting. Random wrestlers could interrupt your match and either help you or hurt you, then you could form new alliances with them or interrupt their matches to gain favor with them. The new WWE games obviously look miles better, but they are so focused on recreating wrestling moments that already happened, so they could prop up the wrestling legends to the extent that nothing is spontaneous. If you followed these wrestlers' careers, you're just playing through a highlight reel at this point, and I know some people may like that, but how many times can you play through that before you get bored? Not many. And that's why you need to buy the next 2K game next year to play the new highlight reel that they'll put together for you. That cannot be me. I know this looks like a tangent from the topic of graphics, but it all falls into the blanket of trying to approximate the real world in every area of gaming. It usually just starts with the graphics, then blends into everything else because the game has to match the tone of what the visuals create. And don't even get me started on some of the writing.
Wow, you sound like a serial killer.
What?
Destruction and corruption are beautiful forms of creation in themselves.
I don't sound like that.
You absolutely sound like that.
No, you absolutely sound like that. Yeah, see? Two can play at that game.
You're f***ing stupid.
'Cause that's exactly how people talk in the real world. The one game that slightly hurts my argument is Red Dead Redemption 2, which is a masterpiece in so many ways. The different locations are so beautiful that you'll find hours of video on YouTube dedicated to the game's scenery, like a travel destination guide, but some sections of the map were so bland and real and boring because not every part of a real landscape will be very interesting. I actually never felt that way about Red Dead 1, but that's because the first game felt like an action-packed Western Hollywood movie or a cartoon, while the second felt like a National Geographic documentary. There was something just very slightly off-putting to me, how realistic the grimy and muddy parts of Red Dead 2 were. It really stripped away the glamour of Red Dead 1 and just got down and dirty with everything. Sometimes I felt like I could smell the mud and grass just by how it looked. Seriously, look at that. Nasty. You just know that town smells bad. And I never feel safe when I go off roaming the beautiful mountains, because literally anything could be out there. One time I was free roaming and it just would not stop raining. It got into my head, so I had to wear a sweater because I started thinking that I was getting sick. Me, in the real world, in my living room. Also, a friend of mine came over and after playing through the opening stages for a while, he got so visibly frustrated and trapped by all the snow. He just wanted to get out of that area because Rockstar delivered too well on the discomfort. I think with Red Dead 2, although they pursued realism as much as they could, the setting is still period, so it's very far removed from modernity. It doesn't feel like an experience I can have on a random Tuesday in my regular life. Or I'm just excusing it because they went as hard on the quality of the game and story and everything else as they did with the graphics. Take notes, Ubisoft or whatever you call yourselves. And just so you don't think I'm a hypocrite, let's stay with Rockstar, who created another visually stunning game, but this time without the substance of a Red Dead 2. I remember being so hyped for GTA 5 and thinking it would finally retire my 9-year obsession with San Andreas, but when the game released, I was playing it with all my pre-excitement while waiting for the game to take over and carry me the rest of the way, but it never happened. Somewhere around the time when Michael ended up in the desert with Trevor, I was talking to one of my GTA buddies and I asked him how the game was going for him, and he said he was still waiting for it to hook him, which is exactly how I felt. We were waiting to fall in love with it like we had done with every previous GTA game, and when we're all done, we both thought, that was it? The story aside, which I never particularly liked, and that is still the only GTA I've played through only once, because I wasn't about to sit through those two old men's incessant pointless arguments again. I found the map extremely forgettable. I had no favorite places like I did in San Andreas or GTA 3 or even Vice City, and they just dump you in a fully open mass of land with no new story-based map reveals or locked sections to anticipate like they did in San Andreas, which had 3 whole cities, and that's when it hit me. They tried so hard to recreate Los Angeles and they lost all the creative stylization and purpose that went into blending story and setting in games like San Andreas. They were not making the map to fit the story. They were making the map to recreate a real-world place, then attempting to add story into it, just to get you acclimatized enough for GTA Online. And it felt so hollow to me how they tried to make you go to certain places on the map and make it feel like it was supposedly necessary. It just never felt like the story or single-player experience came first with this game. I'm convinced they expended the vast majority of their effort in recreating LA, which they were so impressed with when put side by side with the real-world location, then packaged the story and gameplay elements the night before the teacher's deadline. I know this game has a lot of fans, but other than the graphics, tech devices, and convertible cars, I defy you to tell me where this game improved on GTA San Andreas. It was inferior in almost every creative and story-based decision, and I can make a whole separate video defending that position. My San Andreas people, please sound off in the comments. And this is not to say that the older games didn't also try this duplication of the real-world approach, because some of us remember the Getaway's attempt at recreating large sections of London back in the early 2000s. I don't really play Ubisoft games anymore, but I keep hearing that Watch Dogs Legion was also very close to an accurate representation of London, but that's a game that just came and went. The best I heard about it is that it was just vanilla. It feels like once they go through the incredible effort of recreating a real-world city, which is a feat in itself, I don't want to diminish that, their energy seems to be spent, or they think they've done all the work and can slack off on the rest. That's definitely harsh because making games is really difficult, and I don't fault the hardworking devs, but it feels that way to the players. And to further drive home that point with no offense intended at all to the UK, I did not like Forza Horizon 4 because it felt a little too real-world, dull and serious, but Horizon 5 captured the fun that I come to these racing festival games for. So there is definitely a sweet spot when forging forward with these amazing new graphics. In a sentence that probably only my brother will understand, Horizon 4 feels like Monday morning, while Horizon 5 feels like a 4-day weekend. But above all things, the one that solidified that visuals on their own do not create the best gaming experience was The Matrix Awakens Unreal Engine 5 demo. I watched people free roaming through it, and after a few minutes of acclimatizing to the visuals, the lack of substance became very apparent. Also, yes, I am aware that this was a tech demo and not an immersive open-world game, but that just proves my point. Some studios make games that resemble tech demos, and that doesn't usually end well for them. And this is by all means not a blanket statement like I mentioned with Red Dead Redemption 2. We've had games like Horizon Zero Dawn, which was my favorite game on the PS4, and others that are leaping forward creatively, graphically, and stylistically. But I would argue those are outliers rather than the norm. But staying on Horizon for a second, I didn't even want to play it because I missed its media run, and with the little that I knew, I had no interest in some lady fighting dinosaur robots in the future that looks like the past somehow. But man, I'm glad I stumbled across it in a sale. Aloy is bae, this is the creative stylization I'm referring to, and that is all. If you take nothing else from this video, take this. Graphics are just an element of a good game, obviously. But once they become the main focus of the game, it's very likely that a lot of other more important elements of said game will suffer. Probably why my friend is all in on Nintendo, because they have a very different main focus than Sony and Microsoft. But that's enough of what I think. What do you think? Is it a good thing that AAA developers are leaning further and further into reality and less on stylization? I'd love to hear. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.